The Notcast. Life, love and misery and deep shit.
Do you ever wonder, what the fuck am I doing here? Is this it? Maybe you've got the car, career, house, family and friends, everything that should make you happy. But still, there's this tenacious sense of being trapped, stuck, lost, or just a bit bloody empty. Welcome to the Notcast, where two therapist coaches, aka theracoaches, lay bare their psycho-spiritual journey of struggle, strife, and realization in their soul search for the keys to a happier, more fulfilling life.
Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to episode 13 of the Notcast. Am I in a toxic relationship? 5 crystal clear clues your relationship is destroying you.
Boom.
Yeah.
And ouch.
Yeah, definitely.
Originally it was going to be titled, Is It Killing You? But we felt destroying you was a bit more dramatic.
I'm not sure if it is.
I don't know. We could flip a coin, I guess.
Oh, I love it. I love that.
Your relationship is absolutely decimating you. We could have done that. That would have been more words, though.
What a fun episode.
Yay. 13th episode as well.
Yes, absolutely. Not lost on me. Episode 13. It's all about toxic relationships. Joy.
Oh, the synchronicity.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, where do we start? Toxic relationships.
Well, I started, as I normally do, with what does toxic mean? That's where I started.
Go for it.
So toxic means causes harm or poisonous. And so pondering on that, I came to things like slow death.
Cherry.
Concealed harm. Gets inside of you and like death from the inside out. Basically, it's all about well, the idea of toxic, what I came to is it's like there's something about it can cause harm, but it's not necessarily so obvious. Like if you think about, I don't know, violence or something, like if getting stabbed or shot, like it's really obvious. There's something very physical and obvious about that, or even being, something less deathly, like taking a punch.
Yeah.
But there's something about toxic, at least in this, in this context, that was almost like, I want to say insidious about it. But there's something about like it being concealed or not obvious, or maybe invisible's too strong, but it's I'm thinking like radioactivity poisoning or something, like not so obvious first thing. It's like, oh, hang on a minute, you look a bit sick. Oh, it's probably the flu.
Yeah.
And then not the flu.
Yeah. It slowly spreads.
Yeah, that kind of thing. I guess obviously a snake bite or something might be more obvious. But yeah, that's where my mind kind of went with it. There's something about it that's not so clear, and that it's also like harm from the inside out almost. So when I was thinking about toxic relationship, yeah, I came to something along the lines of a connection which causes harm, and maybe something like concealed harm or non-obvious harm, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Because as you were talking, it kind of resonated with me on the level that it was from the inside out when I experienced it. Because the bottom line was, I thought that's what I deserved, and so I let it happen.
Really?
Yeah. And so it was that slow spreading destruction of my entire being.
Wow.
Yeah. So that kind of makes sense to me, because I guess there's a time period where I know for me, I didn't see it. I just thought, because for me, I've been in lots of toxic and abusive relationships, but I guess for me, it was really about, I put myself in that situation. Like, toxic relationships was my model of relationship. And the harm from the relationships that I experienced and witnessed as a child spread into the relationships I had as an adult. So it's definitely that, what you described, right? It's that spreading, where it just spreads, and it spread into my whole world. And my whole world was painful.
Yeah. You know, and I know we've talked about this kind of thing offline, but it's interesting you say about, you know, relationships you experienced early on, because, you know, I think my parents, for example, didn't have the best relationship. And but that was kind of then all I knew, or at least that was, you know, that, I guess that was what was modeled to me.
Yeah.
You know, not to put blame on them. I know they were doing the best that they could, but still that was my experience. And so, yeah, I suppose when I think about some of the difficult relationships that I've been in, and they're still part of me. Like, I still fucking hate using the word like toxic relationship. I mean, toxic's a bit of a buzzword for one thing.
Yeah.
But it also, it's just judgmental as fuck. It's like,
That wasn't this episode. We've already done that one.
it's true though. Like, on some level, it like, I don't know. There's an energy, there's a perspective on it, which for me, you know, I know it can help in one way to label it as this is not a good thing, and these are the signs to look for, you know. And obviously from a marketing perspective, it helps with toxic relationships. I'll click on that shit. But I think, you know, on a level, I don't know. I don't always think it's so helpful to think of it in those terms. I suppose my early experience of relationships is all I had to go on.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when I then got into difficult relationships, I didn't necessarily know there was a different way or another way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because how would you?
Well, yeah, just assumed, well, maybe this is normal. This is how it's supposed to be. And, you know, I was very much, when I was younger, into that whole, well, it's either my fault or your fault. So if things aren't working, then there's
blame.
Yeah, it's playing the blame game. And then it was easy to fall into that trap of, well, if it's not working, it's got to be, well, especially in my earlier relationships, so, well, it's got to be you.
Yeah.
Rather than looking at the interplay.
Yeah. No, I get that. I mean, that really resonates, because that was, as you know, my model of relationship too. So, yeah, every disagreement was an argument. There was no civil way of having a discussion or a conversation. And so I thought that was normal, because nobody told me otherwise. Nobody went, that's not really how it should be, or this is what a relationship looks like, or any of that. So, and even though I can remember clearly as a child thinking, why would anybody stay in a relationship like this? Like, I don't ever want to have a relationship like this. However, that was my known place. That was where I was comfortable. So when it happened, it was like, oh, this I understand. This works. I get this. And I think I needed to reaffirm to myself that that's how every relationship looks. So it's okay.
So I think when I think back, maybe like everybody, like in my first relationships, didn't know what the fuck I was doing.
Yeah.
Like didn't really know what was supposed to be, what was, I don't know. I had no map really. But again, it was easy then to fall into that trap of, oh, it's someone's fault, or not knowing that there was a better way, or even actually being able to look at, you know, what part am I playing in this? And that was something I reflected on, actually. I started with, okay, what does a toxic relationship mean to me? And then it was, who was toxic to me? And then I was like, and what about the relationships where I was the toxic one?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was fun.
Yeah, so much fun, right? Because that was one of my points. It's like, where is your toxicity at? Toxicity? That's the right word, I think.
Yeah. Oh, and I suppose that's for me where, you know, I'm not a fan of the word, because as soon as we start labeling people as toxic, or,
yeah,
you know,
that's, you're not.
Yeah, and that's not helpful.
No.
Because in all cases for me, well, you say, like, there's always, like, if someone's being a certain way to me, let's say inverted commas toxic, like, I have to ask, well, how am I interacting with that?
Yeah.
You know, how am I
Allowing.
how am I allowing or dealing with that? You know, and even in some cases, like, am I provoking or even causing that? Like, what's my part in that?
Yeah. I used to.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the time. Again, because I needed to fulfill my story that, you know, this is who I am. So I would provoke it so that I would get the response that would tell me, this is who you are.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
I love it. On the spot.
That's what we do.
I know. But yeah, it's like provoking little arguments to kind of reaffirm that I am the one that's making the relationship like this, or he's treating me like that because I'm not good enough. So if I could provoke that and get that response, then I could tell myself, yeah, that's why it's like this. I'm not lovable. So obviously this is why this relationship is like this, because I'm doing this. And it would just be a constant cycle of provoking that to get the response I wanted and needed, or reaction. Well, I did it in other ways too, actually. Interestingly enough, in new relationships, I would do it to test the boundaries. See, okay, if I push you far enough, will you hit me? Will you shout at me? Will you, just to provoke? How far can I take this? Am I going to get the normal response?
Past level 5, tick.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I've probably done versions of that in the past. I'm trying to think if any come to me consciously. Well, actually, like something I know I do, like I do. I like to think that it comes from a different place now, but who knows really? I know it didn't always. Something I would often do early on was talk about my exes and just see what the reaction was. And I think some of that probably was because I had a bad experience of jealousy in the past, like of having like the other person be very jealous, and then noticing how my behavior would change and how restrictive that could be as a result. So I think part of me was like, let's see what they do with this.
Yeah.
Which is, well, it's gameplay as fuck, really, isn't it? When you think about it. But I mean, it was coming from a place of trying to protect myself. It's almost like, shit, what am I getting myself into here?
Yeah.
Probably not the healthiest way to do it, obviously, but I think that was the intention, I think.
Yeah. But I guess the bottom line of that is that none of those relationships are healthy. Because that's not how relationships work.
No. But then you could say at the same time, I believe you do want to be able to have a relationship where you can talk openly and honestly about things and about your past and about what's happened to you and what you've learned. And I guess for me, though, it's about where is it coming from? Like, is that coming from a place where I want to share with you and talk about stuff, or is it coming from a place where I want to test you to see if you're going to fuck me over?
Yeah, exactly that. That's one of my favorite questions in the world, is to go, what is my motivation for doing what I'm about to do? Because, yeah, there's not really a motivation behind it. Yeah, I think that's important to ask.
Is this in service, or is this for my own sadistic pleasure? Or maybe both?
Yeah, maybe both. Or maybe just because I want to provoke a reaction in somebody else.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I guess the games we play.
So what was your first clue that you're in a toxic relationship that's destroying you?
Your intuition is fucking screaming at you. Because that for me was the thing I dismissed most often.
Right.
My intuition going, this isn't okay. This isn't right. What's going on? Why are you allowing this? It was constant. And I constantly dismissed it because I didn't trust myself.
Right.
And therefore couldn't trust that voice within me that was telling me to get the fuck out. So for me, it's really like, you already know. And for anyone that's listening to this that has that feeling, I urge you to listen to it. Yeah. Like, don't dismiss the best tool you have, yourself.
Do you know that? Well, it's actually kind of links to my backup point.
Of course it does.
And I'm already feeling that the order of the points that I had is probably going to go completely out the window.
Yes, it is.
Whatever. It's our podcast. We'll make it work. And so one of mine was you feel trapped, restricted, or a bit flat. Mm-hmm. Or I guess just some level of like lacking or like things aren't right. You know, and what for me, that's what I hear, and that's a version of what I heard in what you're saying. It's like part of you knows it's not working. And, you know, when I think back to some of the relationships that I felt stuck in that weren't healthy for me, there was this sense on some level of square peg round hole.
Yeah.
Like there was this sense that it just wasn't working, but there was this part of me that was just wanting to make it work and to fight and to try and fix it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I guess in some ways that's a good thing, because, you know, I don't think it's great to be like, oh fuck, it's not working, throw in the towel too quickly. Like, oh no, they sneezed, fuck it, I'm off. Like, I think it makes sense to perseverance is a virtue and all that. But at the same time, yeah, like to what you talked about intuition, I think sometimes if it feels like there's just, I don't know, I pick your metaphor, like walking through treacle, banging your head against a brick wall.
Oh gosh, there's so many. There's so many to choose from right there. But yeah, no, I get that.
Well, I know, you know, I was in a relationship where it just constantly felt like trying to make it work. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time I don't know, I did feel quite alone with that as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it almost felt like I was, well, yeah, chasing it being better. Mm-hmm. You know, and that leads on to my first one, actually, my actual first one.
Actual first one.
Yeah. Which is you long for the honeymoon period.
Yeah.
Because for me, often like the honeymoon period is that, oh my God, this person's amazing, and you know, everything's great, and like we'd like all the same things, or like they're so different, but I love it, and you know, it's like rose tinted glasses. Like,
yeah,
they can do no wrong. I mean, they've murdered 4 people, but it's fine. I can get on with that.
Okay, I understand that. It's understandable.
Yeah. We're all human. We all make mistakes. But yeah, it's like, and there is that, you know, there is something beautiful about that period, I think. But it's also not fucking real life, to be bleak about it. Or at least it's not the forever state, probably is a more fair way to put it. And, you know, when I think about the relationships that I've been in that you might label toxic, or that have been, you know, really harmful for me, or even, you know, harmful for the other person, harmful for both of us, there's often been this sense of, oh, if only we could go back to how things were.
Yeah.
You know, and when I get really fucking honest about it, some of that is, well, it's about denial, really, and escapism. It's like trying to go back to how things were, because I don't want to face the fact that actually it's not working. Like maybe we're not the same people, or like we don't want the same things. Like we're fundamentally different, or we fundamentally rub each other up the wrong way, or I don't know, you know, whatever it is. And it's like this fear almost of not wanting to face that and deal with it, or somehow try and work through that, and then just longing for this impossibility of somehow getting back to some place that not really possible to recreate after the first 3-6 months, a year. I don't know. Some people apparently have honeymoon periods a year. It's never really been longer than 6 months for me.
Oh, I love it. I kind of see that phase as the bit that we see in movies and go, yeah, that's how a relationship should be.
Yeah. And that's where Disney ends.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No, that really, It's interesting because I'm thinking there's been relationships I've had where there hasn't even been that. Or it's just been like a shit show from the beginning.
Wow.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Now I'm intrigued. Like, so many questions. Like,
You can save it for later.
I don't know if you know what podcast we're on. It might be appropriate to talk about them now. Hashtag just saying. But that's just my take. I am only half of this venture.
Oh, love it, love it, love it. Well, I guess, I'm going to take it and put it into my next point because it just makes sense. Okay. So my next one was no emotional intimacy. And I guess that in itself is the answer to what you asked, because I wasn't ready for that. And the reason I say I wasn't ready for that is because I had no emotional intimacy with myself. So how I was going to have it with other people is beyond me. But I guess my childhood experience of relationships, while I was in that whole relationship, it was shit from beginning to end. So it's like, that's okay if a relationship starts like that. You don't have to start in that, where the honeymoon period lasts forever. I didn't even really see that as a thing.
Right.
Yeah. Because I think in those kind of relationships, I fell into relationships where things happened very, very quickly. And for me, it was like I was escaping something else.
Gotcha.
So whatever it was okay. But also not having any self-love or loving myself or anything like that. I didn't really have a barometer for how it was okay or not okay for people to treat me. And it didn't matter to me. Like, it wasn't a thing I thought about, like, how is this person treating me emotionally? Because I couldn't fulfill my own emotional needs. Like, I didn't know I had emotional needs. But my experiences have taught me that it doesn't work without an emotional connection or emotional intimacy. Like, being able to be completely honest with each other, being able to bring the vulnerability, being able to just have open and honest conversation and not be afraid that I'm going to say something which is going to, I don't know, turn into some sort of explosive response or reaction, and really having to be mindful of my emotional self, like, was really, really difficult. And I don't think I know emotional intimacy is one of the central parts of a relationship that works.
Yeah. Well, promise it's not scripted.
We insist every week it's not. And yet.
They're not going to believe us after a while. Well, my next point I was originally going to label as things are eggshelly as fuck.
Yeah.
But what I retitled it as was you can't be honest about feelings, wants and needs.
Yeah.
And basically to everything that you talked about, it's like, I've been in relationships before where, things have seemed very triggerable. And what it's looked like to me, it's like, oh, the other person is triggerable. And that's, I can think of times when that has been true. But also, when I think about it, there have been times where I've been triggerable. I know the way I could be very triggerable in the past, for example, would be I would stonewall. I'd go like into myself.
Yeah.
Now I didn't see it like that, and I didn't see it as, like an emotional shutdown or disconnecting from the other person, or possibly even causing the other person to feel eggshelly, because I was busy in my head trying to sort out my shit. But when I think about it, honestly, like, that's what was happening. If I was in a relationship, like I remember a particular relationship I was in where, that even my girlfriend at the time, he said to me quite openly, like, have you been triggered? And just her asking me that question made me feel so shit and like embarrassed and ashamed and everything. Like I couldn't talk to it. And so I just I can't remember what I did, but I remember turning away and disconnecting.
Yeah.
anyway. And actually, when I think about it, that was her trying to connect over it. And yeah, and like I wasn't able at that point to do that. So I disconnected for my own safety, but then to the detriment of the relationship, really. And I know she struggled with those kind of conversations and those kind of connections anyway, over things that were vulnerable or, you know, difficult. So if anything, that was, you know, that probably just fed her fears at that point.
Wow.
But yeah, like, you know, everything you talk to about, you know, needing to be able to share. Like, I remember there was a relationship I was in where, like, it wasn't so obvious to begin with, but it struck me that, well, at some point it was like, why am I always looking forward to doing MDMA with my partner? Well, and actually I realized, like, part of it was because that felt like the time that we could be really open and honest, and there was less likely to be any triggering.
Mm-hmm.
Because there were points where there was just stuff it felt like there were certain topics and things I felt we couldn't talk about.
Yeah.
You know, and like I said, you know, looking back in relationships, I've seen both sides of that. But this particular relationship, I think, I noticed it from my side, where there were certain things I felt I couldn't talk about, or at least I knew if we were going to talk about or that could come up, it would be difficult. And yet I'd had the experience. It's like, oh, when we're both high, that's different.
Then our relationship's great.
Well, yeah, exactly, right? But then, and in some respects, it's normal. It's like, oh, things are great when we're high, so let's just be high more often.
That sorts it all out.
Yeah, but obviously, a couple more steps back, it's like, oh, hang on a minute, maybe this is telling me something. If we can't have these conversations sober,
yeah. 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 I guess that's and that's the thing, that's the kind of thing that I used to have to do. I say I had to. That's what I used to think at the time. It's like I would have to have a drink if I needed to have a conversation. It's like, I need to tell you something. I'd need to prep myself in that way because I had no idea what the reaction might be.
Yeah.
And one day it could be totally, normal. And another day it could be off the charts. So, yeah, somehow that became okay as a way to have conversations in relationships. So, yeah, it's amazing what we make okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing, though, isn't it? Like, if there's something, no one loves doing scary, uncomfortable shit.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can do adrenaline junkies really love that stuff. Maybe you can get to the point where you train yourself to do it, but stuff that actually feels scary and uncomfortable to you, I think most of us, like, that's where we need courage, right? That's where it's often a conscious effort to go, I'm going to have to take a step towards that, and that's going to be a challenge for me. Like, it's not something like, oh, great, scary, uncomfortable shit, can't wait.
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to this.
Clear my schedule. Let's dive in.
Yeah.
And I think if you've had experience of, you know, this might end badly, you know, this other person might, you know, react in a way that makes things worse, or at least it seems it's going to make things worse. I think there is only so many times you do that before at some point your mind starts going, yeah, maybe we'll put that off.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll, I don't know, watch a movie instead, or just pretend it's not happening. Or
do I really need to say this? Is it really that important?
Do you know when it'll be a great time for this conversation? Tomorrow. Or
never.
Oh, well, it's never, right? It's never. It's like at some point.
Yeah, at some point. And then it comes out in some sort of, you know, crazy argument type situation. And then it doesn't make any sense. And you can't get your point across. There you go. Don't do that shit. Oh, gosh. Where are we at? Is it my turn?
I think it's your turn to do your third.
Oh, which one should I go for?
From
So
the list
many.
of 37.
Close, 39.
Fucking hell.
His face.
I mean, look, to be fair, I've got about 25 lines on my spreadsheet, but I have grouped them.
He's got a spreadsheet.
I have upgraded to a spreadsheet. I've taken on your idea, your influence, if you like, of like brainstorming multiple ideas, but then, you know, multiple points just confuses me. So I have to do some reviewing.
Fuck all that. I just want to go back to the bit where you said I took on your idea.
I'm open to learning. I'm open to growth.
Because I'm sure our listeners can remember a time near the beginning of the Notcast where it's like, oh, for fuck's sake, she's got this many points.
Look, I can't be right all of the time, okay? I can settle for most.
Okay. You keep telling yourself that.
I shall. The ivory tower is rather comfy, I'll have you know.
Yeah. It's also an illusion.
You leave my bloody tower alone. It's my tower. You're no longer invited. I'm locking the door.
I don't want to come to your tower.
Point number 3.
Okay. Point number 3. It's not a fucking game.
Tell me more.
I used to get so caught up in this, and it became like a one-upmanship. It's like, you done this or said this, so then I have to do something that tops that, and then it just keeps going, and it fucking goes, and it just doesn't stop. And it can, for me, it's become quite vile and aggressive and all sorts of things. But what ended up happening, it's like the relationship becomes a game that you're playing. It's like, how can I win? So rather than going, how can we solve this together? Every argument is, how can I win? And going in with that mentality of there's a win-lose situation here. And somehow if I don't, in inverted commas, win this argument, then I've lost. And I've lost some part of me in this relationship. Yeah, it's not a game. And it isn't about winning or losing. And if that mindset is there, that needs to be checked very, very quickly. Because I guess it's a collaboration. It's a coming together of two people. It's a partnership. It's not a game. And as soon as winning and losing comes into the dynamic, it becomes destructive and painful and misses the whole point of what a relationship is. Because I can remember holding on to things and thinking, I've got to get one up on this. And I can remember it being done to me all the time, where it was like a game. It's like, oh, you got me there, so I need to get you there. But then when it turns aggressive, then it becomes dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting you talking about that. It reminds me of one of my earlier relationships. I remember it getting to a point like after work, every day I'd come home and I'd ring her. And I started to recognize that from the way she answered the phone, I knew whether we were going to have an argument or not. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I remember there being a point where within our arguments where, like, I used to think that when we were arguing about something that it was to solve that problem.
Yep.
But I started to notice this pattern where I'd be talking about this particular point, and then when, I don't know, when it seemed to be that we started to make headway on it, then it would change to a different point, and it was just being moved all over the shop. And I was like, what the fuck? Well, then in my, late teenager, early 20s mind, like the assessment I made from that is, oh, this is a game. And it's about winning. So I was like, right, fuck you then.
Oh, yes, that.
Well, and that was the thing, because then I just remember being fucking cruel, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, essentially destroying her. But then I realized it was like, oh, well, now I've got to pick up the pieces. And it wasn't very long before that stopped making sense to me to do that. And, I didn't understand, like, I didn't understand what I do now. So, that whole, trying to win and doing whatever it takes, it doesn't make sense anymore. But it was interesting how it did. And I have been in relationships since where I've been on the receiving end of that.
Yeah.
And so I get it. Because when I see that kind of behavior now, it's like it's like a combination between trying to protect myself and also kind of, in a way, like raise my status so that I feel okay, so I don't feel downtrodden or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so fucking destructive, and it doesn't actually achieve what it's trying to achieve. And it leads to my third point, actually, which kind of mirrors your third point,
mm-hmm.
which is you don't feel like a team.
Yeah.
Basically, if you're not, it's like you're not on the same side.
Yeah.
And I think, when you are arguing to that point where you're trying to win or trying to get one up or playing games or whatever, like, you're not your enemies at that point.
Yeah. There's nothing collaborative about that.
Exactly. And, there's some research John Gottman did. Like, he wrote a book, 20 odd years ago now, which I love, called The 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work. And he had this thing called a love lab, which sounds dodgy as fuck, but he basically invited couples to hang out in this apartment that they had rigged with like recorders and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then he analysed all their conversations. And I think he got to a point where he could predict within 15 minutes of listening to people talk whether they were going to get a divorce, whether they were going to split up, within so many months.
Yeah.
And he had like a 90% or over 90% success rate with that prediction.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that came out of the research, he said, was essentially this: what makes a good relationship is strong friendship.
Yeah.
Right. That's the biggest predictor, like strong friendship. When you're, which to me is like when you're connected and you're on the same side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You've got each other's back, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And yet the 4 things he said, which were the biggest predictors of a couple splitting up, were what he called the Four Horsemen.
I love that. Doom.
Yeah. Which were criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling.
Right. It makes sense.
Yeah. And for me, if you think about it, those are all things you do to your enemy or someone you're trying to shut out.
Yeah.
Someone who you believe or who is trying to attack you.
Absolutely. I get that. Yeah. It's not a game, people. Yeah. Because listening to it now, although I know I was in it, but when listening to you talking about it, it's kind of like, it makes obvious sense. How is that going to work? Like, if you're not on the same team, if it's a game, it's really not going to work. And it's really sad to fall into that, where it becomes that one-upmanship and we're against each other, and yet we're trying to have a relationship. Yeah. Because it's just not a very nice thing to be in competition with each other. Yeah.
I've been in a couple of relationships where it was almost very, like, it wasn't like that all the time. That's the thing. It wasn't constant, but it could switch.
Mm-hmm.
Like, things could be great and it felt like we were really together and connected and fine. And then something would happen, something would trigger something. And sometimes this could, literally be, I don't know, when I'm thinking about it from when it was the other person doing it. Sometimes it could be like, I remember an ex who, she would finish work and come round and she would just sit there. And I could see, after a while, that she was in a bad place because her jaw had gone and she wasn't very talkative. And I'd be there just chatting away, making dinner, trying to, like, I don't know, get some kind of connection. And it was almost like she sat there just waiting for me to say something. Now, I know it wasn't as, like, manipulative as that. It wasn't like she was sat there, like, clasping her fingers, like, yeah, go on, you just say the thing. I think more what was happening was I would say something which would flag something in her mind, and she'd just jump on it. And then, like, and then would cut me down, and I would be like, fuck. Now, I don't think at that point that was really about me. Like, I could tell at that point Like she walked in like that, and I was just had it taken out on me. But it was then obvious at that point. It's like, well, we're not, we're not on the same side here.
Yeah.
With you doing that.
Yeah. No, I get that. It's amazing how little things start and then they turn into patterns. And then it's just like, it just becomes a pattern. And I guess it's that thing, like you sort of said, that it wasn't all the time and sometimes it's not all the time. And I guess it's that's when we let it go. It's kind of like, it was that one time, I'm sure it won't happen again. And then it happens again. And then, people make that okay. But it's like, where's the limit?
Mm.
Where is the limit? And it's difficult, right? When you're in that relationship, because it's on balance. It's like, on balance, all of this is good. But over there, I feel like utter shit. But it's only happened one time, 5 times. And it's like, well, okay, where is the line? Like, where do you draw the line on that? I guess is the important question.
Yeah. That's the thing, because, there was a relationship where I was in where, I don't know, it was almost, in some ways, the whole thing was quite eggshelly, because, I would go round to hers and it was like, who am I going to get?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And sometimes it wasn't even that. Sometimes it could be like, I'd be at work and then the last thing I knew, the messages we were having back and forth were fine. And then I checked my phone and it's like I hadn't got a message, or there was there was something to suggest, oh, hang on, something's not right. And it could be something that had happened in her day.
Yeah.
Maybe nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly there was this connection between us. And then, well, what it felt like was I was either the bad guy or I was being shut out. It would depend. But there was that disconnection. It was some level of like, yeah, I'm not part of this thing. Like, we are now separated as an entity. Like, she's now dealing with this thing. Whether I'm the bad guy and therefore actively being attacked, or I'm just being shut out as if like it's not your problem, or you're making it worse. And don't get me wrong, I've done exactly the same thing. Like, I didn't see it like that. I just saw it as, I'm having a shit time and I need to deal with it. But, having seen the effect on me when someone does it to me, I can now appreciate the effect that I have had on, partners in the past where I've done that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And I guess there's the beauty when you're open to the learning to create a difference moving forward. I guess you have to see it in yourself to be able to create that. And that's the difficult bit. That's the difficult bit.
Oh. I was going to say, it's not difficult if you love being wrong and love being uncomfortable and love admitting you're...
Oh, yeah. All day long.
Top of my Christmas list, I'll tell you.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, okay. Next one.
Number 4.
Love.
Of course. In what context? That's very broad.
In all contexts. Okay. For me, it's like the starting point. What is love? And have you actually looked at what is love in the relationship? Because everybody's definition of love is different. And for me, when people used to ask me, like, what is love? Or I thought about love, the first word that came to me would be painful or hurt. Because I fully bought into love hurts and love is painful. And that was my version of love. And it was difficult and it was hard work. And to all intents and purposes, wasn't that real and could just disappear just like that. And if you love somebody, you have to tolerate all of their bullshit and then some. And loving somebody means not leaving, letting them treat you however they want to. So those were all the ways that I thought love worked. And it really worked against me. I can tell you that now. But then when you're met with another person that similarly has that sort of definition of love, it just becomes explosive and everybody's trying to protect themselves all the time, because if I give my love to you, then it's gonna hurt and it's gonna be painful. So I have to restrict that somehow. So then, and I points to the bigger thing around communication in relationships, right? And really having that time to sit down together and kind of go, what is love to you? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What's the expectations? What are the assumptions that we make? What is the relationship fucking baggage? And I feel like those things are really, really important to understand, because then I can understand where somebody else is coming from. And I can understand how that dance in the relationship could work or might not work, or the bits that need to be worked on. So I think that it's really important understanding to have, because love looks different to people. It's not given. So.
It's an interesting point, because it's one of those things, isn't it? Like, most of the songs that you hear are about love in some way or another, but ask someone to define love, and ask 10 people to define love, you'll get completely different descriptions.
Absolutely. I feel like people just think the word love, if they say I love you, then it's like, I don't need to do anything else. I said the words. And it's like, love isn't in the words. It's in the action. It's in the intent. And so, when that is missing and that is not explored and that is not front and center, from my experience, it utterly fucks up a relationship and is very, very toxic.
Yeah. Well, I guess that goes back to your point about, we were talking about, like, what's your experience of this? If your early experience of a relationship is a certain way.
Yeah.
And it's like, if your experience of love is a certain way. I mean, I know, what I thought love was really that feeling of, I don't even know what you call it. I want to say lust, but that's a bit raunchy. I don't quite mean lust. Lust is the wrong word. But that kind of like, that feeling of like having a crush on someone. Yeah. Like, I thought that's what love was. That was the feeling. And it's like, that feeling's telling me that this person is the right person for me. It's like, absolutely fucking not. In fact, I love it. That feeling is probably telling me that person is going to be a good match for all my bullshit in the worst possible way.
Yeah, probably. Oh, I love that.
Didn't realize that back then, but then, like I said, that because that was my understanding. Oh, I feel this for someone, so they must be a good person for me, the right person. And then wondering why 6 months later, when things are going to shit, it's like, but why? Because I used to have this feeling about them. I don't understand. And I know we've talked about it before. That's why I love that Massive Attack song. Like, love is a verb. Love's a doing word.
Yep.
And I really didn't see that before. It's like I've really figured that I could just show up in a relationship. It's like, all right, okay, in a relationship now, cool, tick.
Yeah, love you. Yeah, tick. Like, nothing behind that. It's just words.
Well, and then I'll skip my fourth point and go to my fifth.
Fabulous.
But this then leads on to one of my points was. You're scared to leave more than you want to stay.
Scared to leave more than you... Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think this was something that I was fully consciously aware of to the extent that it makes sense to me now. Mm-hmm. But, a pattern I did have would be get into a relationship. Yeah, there's that honeymoon period. Yeah, things are great. And then things would start to go wrong. Or, somehow downhill or not good for both of us.
Yeah.
And I think looking back now, like, I did want it to work. I did want to improve things and change things. But there were also points where I'd be fucking hopeless about it and not know what to do. And maybe from the outside, The obvious thing would have been like, leave, or, you know, have the difficult conversations or do something that's not what you're doing. But what stopped me was this fear that I'm not going to find something better. Like, what I've got here is the best, or like amazing in a way that, you know, can't be replaced. And, you know, I know we've talked about this, or I've said this on a previous episode, I think. Like, I do think there is a uniqueness about connections that you can't just try and slot someone else in where someone else was. Like,
yeah, that doesn't work. Try that.
There's a terrible pun in there somewhere, but we'll move swiftly on.
Yes, let's do that.
But like, yeah, I don't think you can replace a specific connection, but because there is a uniqueness in a connection with a person, though that's different to, I think, accepting that, you know what, this is not healthy for me, you know, and having this sense of knowingness that, you know what, if I don't have this anymore, yeah, it might be shit and there might be pain and it might be, you know, whatever, but actually I'm going to be okay. And it actually might lay ground for me finding something that's more nourishing, that's not so much fucking hard work, that's not so painful, toxic, difficult, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know in the past when that didn't seem like a possibility to me. There was just, when I think about it, really, the idea of leaving a lot of the time, there was just so much fear, I guess, or a belief in that it would be worse if I didn't, that
yeah,
it kept me in what was essentially a poisonous situation.
Yeah. Interesting. Because I'm going to finish with the last one. Is it my turn to finish my last one? I don't know.
I think so. I think it's 5 now. Yeah.
Yeah. Fear. I love how it's just today. It's just like really fluid. Love it. Fear. I was afraid to be myself. I was afraid to bring my true self. I was afraid to say things that I really wanted to say. I was afraid to ask certain questions. I was afraid to speak my truth. I was afraid of doing things wrong. I was afraid of fucking it up. And when I look back at it now, I think, yeah, that was definitely a sign that this was abusive. And I felt completely constrained, like I had to be anything other than who I really was. So I felt like I just played this role and tried to minimize and suppress myself so that I wouldn't be hurt or I wouldn't be put down, or it wouldn't turn into some sort of fight. And I think the worst example of that for me was when I did access to law for a bit and he didn't want me to go to college. So for the first time, he hit me on my face so that everybody could see it, and I would be too ashamed to go to college.
Fuck.
But it went all the way to that level, and still I stayed because I was so afraid.
Yeah.
So fear is definitely a sign. It shouldn't feel like that. It should be easy to go and speak to that person. It should be freeing to do that. There shouldn't be fear in being the fullest expression of who you are. That should be encouraged. For me, it's about lighting each other up and encouraging each other to fly and to be the best version of yourself and to bring that to the relationship. For me, my experience was the complete opposite.
Yeah. Well, you talking about that, it reminds me of a relationship I was in where things started well and there was the honeymoon period and things were great. And then I didn't realize this process happening. But what I think slowly started to happen was I started spending more time focusing on the relationship and in a way I stopped doing things that were so independent, I want to say, and doing things that would nourish me. And that was from a place of fear, I think, because it was through a fear of her, what she might do if she wasn't with me, and whether that was because she might go off with someone else or she might do something that could harm herself or whatever. So I started, spending more time focused on the relationship. But I hadn't really noticed because it was like almost quite a slow period. But I remember getting to the point I was just like, I remember dropping her off and then I was just crying all the way home and being confused as to why. And I genuinely, I couldn't work it out. And I was like depressed but upset. And I not before, when I'd been depressed, it was that kind of just beating myself up, being a shit person depressed. I'd not experienced that kind of just massive sadness and then not understanding why. And long story short, I then decided to get some help with it, basically. And what that led to was me understanding that I was no good at standing up for myself. Like what I thought I'd been doing was being so good at practicing compassion. And don't get me wrong, like I think I had done, because I'd come a long way from being like like the days of it's all your fault and I'm fine and you need to change. But I'd moved to that place of, I guess, stereotypically what you might call a doormat, of being like, no, like I get it. It's okay. And, I'm going to do everything I can to help you. Like, if you like, it's that kind of fixer position.
No, absolutely.
And yeah, it was a big wake up call to realize that, because then when I started to actually put my foot down about things and actually start to state my position and then I got the kickback from it.
Yeah, of course.
And it was uncomfortable as fuck.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, because, then that's when that's all, in a way, those were the reactions that I'd been kind of fearing, the threats to leave and the kind of, the explosive fights and the disconnecting and the, fuck you, I'm going to disappear and, turn my phone off or whatever.
Yeah.
But that did then lead me to a point through doing that where I then did get to a point where I could go, do you know what? I can't do this anymore. And and where I knew eventually I would be okay, but only because I think I'd kind of in a way I'd proven to myself, like I'd seen that I did have the ability to stand up for myself. I did have the ability to change the narrative, as it were, rather than be in that, submissive reactive mode, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like fear is very destructive within a relationship. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, because that's like I said, that's all the stuff I was afraid of. I was afraid of, what might happen, what she might do, what it would be like if we weren't together anymore.
Yeah. A lonely place. Yeah. That was cheerful.
You want cheerful, you know where I am.
Yes. Thanks, David.
Keeping it real.
Bless you. We're nothing if not that. Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to have a laugh and a cry at the same time and also think, what's the fucking point? Come listen to the Notcast. Yeah. We got your back.
Absolutely. I don't know. Like, yeah. Is that all our 5 points?
Well, I've got another one, but we're probably over time, so. I'll tell you what, I will share off my final point briefly.
Go on.
And that's trying to hide the truth from others.
Yeah.
And this really struck me when I'd gone out with some friends and my girlfriend at the time wasn't with me. She couldn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of them approached me from a real concern point of view, and they were like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, at that point, I genuinely was like, I was having a great time. I was like, Yeah, why? And they were like, well, last couple of times we've seen you, like, you really haven't seen it. You haven't seen yourself. And, and I was quite open with those two, like, at that point, but it really hit home that I was like, oh, fuck, like, this is not just, like, other people are seeing this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm part of it. I think, what I said to myself at the time was I never wanted to be that guy that, went to the pub and just bitched about his girlfriend. And I think there's some truth in that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the other side of it was that, if I start telling other people about what's really going on, about how I really feel, it becomes really, really fucking obvious to me.
Yeah.
What I've got to do, what I've got to face, what I've got to sort out.
Yeah.
Because I'm just waiting for them to turn around and say the thing I'm afraid of doing, which is like,
yeah,
you thought about doing some of this a bit differently.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's such a huge point and feeds back into what I said before, because before that time, he would only hit me elsewhere on my body. So nobody could see it.
Wow.
And I would hide it.
Yeah.
But I guess as we're near the ending, I have to stay. I still went into fucking college. So it didn't fucking stop me. But then people knew.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't hide it anymore from myself.
Wow. Just to that point, I want to say fair fucking play.
Thank you.
So, closing points on toxic relationships and clues that you're in one.
Yeah. Honor yourself. Love yourself enough to see it and do something different, because you don't deserve that.
Yeah. So my closing thoughts are, not everything's easy all the time, but if it feels like hard work and you're not working at it together, like you're not on the same side, and you kind of have to ask why. And for me, a really good, honest question is like, is this relationship serving me or is it hurting me? That's me. That's all I got.
Yeah. That was beautiful. Thank you. So that's it. That's the end of episode 13. Thank you very much.
13 episodes done and dusted.
You've been listening to the Notcast podcast, Life, Love, Misery and Deep Shit, with your TheraCoach hosts,
Amy Dave
and David Bird.
Amy is a transformative spiritual and self-love coach and therapist who takes people on a powerful journey towards self-love and personal transformation. She empowers her clients to discover the truth of who they really are, their true purpose, and the truest expression of themselves, whilst enabling them to navigate life and its challenges with ease, grace, and above all, love. Create relationships that rock their world and let go of the toxic shit that holds them back. You can connect with Amy on her Facebook at facebook.com/amy.dave11. That's AMI.DAVE.11.
David is a transformative coach and hypnotherapist who guides his clients on a journey of self-exploration and transformation to smash the shit out of their mental stumbling blocks and send their emotional baggage packing, helping them to get back in the driver's seat, create a more powerful, loving connection to life, and unleash onto the world their bright, shining light of authentic give-a-fuckness. You can connect with David at his website, dbch.co.uk. That's dbch.co.uk.
The Notcast.